Welcome back to another episode and a special men's edition of the Life of the Young Funeral Professionals. Here on the platform today, as you can see, I am not Raheem. Of course, I'm your creative director, Courtney Hempel, and I am back today to host in Raheem's space. Raheem is not feeling well today, so again, we're going to send our prayers and well wishes to him. But we are definitely going to keep the ball rolling because that is what we do here at the Life of the Young Funeral Professionals. Today, we have another trailblazer that we are honoring today and that we get a chance to really dive into their journey. This whole month is about diving into the journey of our men in our funeral service to kind of create our roadmap so we can create a better future. So definitely want to shout out this gentleman who is an educator. He's a father. He is an amazing leader within the realm of funeral service. He actually is he recently just finished teaching at the Eastwood College. I'm going to let him talk a little bit more about that once he comes in. But today we do honor our guest as one of our industry trailblazers. Mr. Kyle Ledford has done amazing work in his area to uphold the values and the dignity of funeral service in the funeral industry, in the community, as well as the families that he serves. And we're truly inspired by his journey, blessed by his example of servant leadership and ability to steward well over the gifts that God has given him. Not only to lead, but also his willingness to break cultural and societal norms. And we honor his sacrifice to become a very vital part of the industry. The standard that he has set in his community continues to pave the way for many who aspire to serve this present age and fulfill their callings within this industry. We appreciate his yes and the posture of his heart, and we're equally excited to see where God takes him. And please help us celebrate and welcome Mr. Kyle P. Ledford, Sr., CFSP, and the owner and licensed funeral director of Ledford Funeral Home in Trenton, New Jersey. So, hey, Mr. Ledford, how are you?
Good evening. How are you today, Courtney?
Quite all right, thank you. Just finally making it back from my trip across the pond, but I am doing quite well today.
We're glad you made it back safely.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much. Well, we want to certainly thank you for joining us today and just to sharing a little bit of your time with us tonight as we delve in a little bit about your journey and your background in funeral service. So if you don't mind, just kind of introducing yourself to our audience and our platform and just kind of letting us know kind of how you got your start in funeral service and anything that you want to kind of mention as we begin tonight.
Sure. I think, though, it's important that before I start, I recognize you, Raheem, and your team for the work that you all are doing, moving the needle forward in a way that is authentic to you. Specific to funeral service, and we're going to talk about that, over the next few minutes. It's critical that people bring their skill set and they're all to this industry because that's what the industry needs. And as young professionals, I want to commend you for the work that you're doing and challenge you to keep going.
Yes, sir. Thank you so very much. We appreciate that.
Absolutely. Now, to answer your question specifically, I was a young man who was born and raised in Linden, New Jersey, a town kind of just shy of Newark, New Jersey. I think people are very familiar with that, close to New York City, kind of in central Jersey. And probably as far back as I can remember, funeral service was what it is that I wanted to do. I was raised by parents who were in the corporate space. And so they had some challenges specifically with entrepreneurship, right? Because it was something that they were unfamiliar with. But again, it was something that I wanted to do. So fast forward all through both elementary, middle, and high school, funeral service was the it for me. I made preparations to attend Mount Ida College in Boston. And in my senior year, pretty close to graduation, my folks told me that unfortunately I would not be going to Mount Ida and that I needed to find a regular college to attend before they would entertain mortuary school. So with that being said, I looked nowhere else because funeral service was my thing. And I had an older brother who had went to Hampton University down in Virginia. So I said, well, that's, I guess, where I will go because I don't know any other college. I've never looked at another college, but I'll just go where, my older brother Randy went. And that's what I did. I ended up on the campus of Hampton University right after senior year, and I did not want to be there. It was just something that my parents made me do. So with that, I exited the school with a bachelor's degree in 3 years because I was ready to go. And I had my eyes set at that time on McAllister Institute of Funeral Service in New York City. And so that's what happened. I graduated and then transferred over to McAllister for my funeral service education. And then there was just, an unction within me to continue on. So I went on to Montclair State University for my master's degree. So that was kind of like the roadmap and the start, I would say, educationally. But all the while, from probably middle school, I had been knocking on doors at funeral homes in my neighborhood, unsuccessful at securing a job until one day I went to a firm in Newark, which was kind of outside of my region, as a young person without a driver's license. And that's where I met and was hired by Carolyn Wiggum of the Wiggum Funeral Home in Newark, New Jersey. At that time, her father was still alive, and she was transitioning in to take over the business as both he and his wife, Mr. and Mrs. Wiggum's health was failing. And so I was fortunate enough to land a job there. And that's kind of where my funeral service kind of career kind of began, because that's where the work of funeral service had really kind of come alive for me. So between McAllister in terms of the education and then Wiggum Funeral Home with my practical experience, that was really the foundation for my funeral service training. I was licensed there at the funeral home and then worked there for many, many years. Simultaneously, once deciding really that funeral service was within reach for me in terms of ownership and leadership, I prepared to own my own funeral home. But guess what? I didn't have any money, so I had to find a stable job that would provide money. At that time, I thought for me to kind of save to eventually buy a funeral home. But after working full time, making a decent salary, you kind of realize that that's still not enough money to open, an effective funeral home with. And I, for one, did not want to find myself in a situation where I've kind of rented to begin a funeral business. I wanted to own, by that meaning own the business entity coupled with the property and the brick and mortar. And that's another, I think, point of information that up and coming funeral service professionals need to kind of know and to understand, right? Because everybody says, I want to own a funeral home, right? But what does that mean? What does that actually mean in terms of the business and the business structure behind it? A name on a building, that really doesn't mean anything, right? Whose building is it? Whose land is it? And at Hampton University, where I went to school undergrad, at that time, the president, William R. Harvey, that's all that he talked about was owning land and brick and mortar. Forget about everything else. Fancy cars that don't mean nothing, but get into real estate. And so that's the mindset that I had that kind of carried me. So what I did was I went into corporate America, and I had a business plan to open a funeral home. And the business model was really based upon serving zero consumers, right? So my business model was based upon the fact that I would pay the mortgage for 20 years, even if I had no consumers, right? So that at the end of the 20 years, I'd be less than 50 years old, and I would literally own brick and mortar, a funeral home, right? And so many that's crazy. Like, I'm going to open up a funeral home and service everybody. That's not what reality is. Especially being a newcomer, right? People don't know you. People don't trust you. Sure, if you want to be a low-cost leader or a low-cost provider, people will come kind of based upon the fact that you are discounting services. So if they're financially challenged, hey, it may work. But in terms of sustainability, will that work for you as a model, kind of running a business going forward as a newcomer, right? And so that's kind of how I went at it, in terms of opening the funeral home, and kind of getting things started from the beginning. I was kind of bivocational. I had both the funeral home, and at that time I was in corporate America, working at a supermarket company based upon the Northeast in human resources. And so there I was able to kind of learn skills that helped me kind of better manage and deal with people. And so that's kind of the blend, that happened in order for me to actually acquire, Ledford Funeral Home and open it to the public. Present day, the funeral home is a little over 20 years old. And we've had a little bit more than 0 consumers. But the funeral home is there and it's doing its thing, servicing the community. And I'm so fortunate, for the families that call upon us to service them. But, for me, that just wasn't enough, right? And so I wanted to ensure a future for this industry, a future for people like yourselves and students and persons of interest. So I kind of went into education, right? And the way that I kind of landed there was very, very unique and very, very interesting. And ended up being the program director at Eastwick College. All the while being very, very active in the associations and organizations that bring about change to funeral service. And so if you look, present day, I guess at my resume, very active in funeral service, both at the local level here in the state, in terms of national perspective with the National Funeral Directors and Morticians Association. I'm a part of their executive board, serving in the role as treasurer. Looking at the Academy of Professional Funeral Service Practice, currently their president for the next 2 years, and then very active on the state level with the executive board of the New Jersey State Funeral Directors Association. And so I try to keep it moving, all the while by bringing, kind of difference and change to the industry.
For certain. And I see we have a couple of your students that are in the comment section on our YouTube page. So welcome to our Eastwick graduates and current students. But yes, they would definitely have shed some light on some things that a lot of people really don't think about in terms of establishing your mortuary, establishing what it's going to look like, and kind of being that forward thinking. That's a lot of times that gets lost by the wayside by the pomp and the circumstance of what the industry can bring versus what it actually takes to kind of get to it. So I actually thank you, because you hit on a lot of the questions in our first section. So what are some things that you did to kind of find balance between building your funeral empire, building your funeral home, building your business, as well as between your personal life?
So when I look at my personal life, that was the biggest challenge, right? How do I provide for my bride and my 3 offspring, right? Because they got to eat, right? I was okay with not eating, right? But I had to take care of my family. So that's one of the reasons why I went into kind of corporate America, to ensure stability, right? So that I know that I'm going to go to work, each and every day. And at the end of the week, I'm going to bring home X, Y, and Z. And with that, I'll be able to take care and provide for my home life. And at the same time, because kind of keep in mind, I had this funeral home that was growing. And so I had to take care of that, right? And you know me well, and you know how I feel about money and managing money, right? And so there was a divide, right? So I had to make sure that side A was taken care of, and unequivocally make sure side B was taken care of, all while kind of focusing on the goal. I was very, very fortunate, that my wife was supportive and she understood, and the fact that she's not in the industry, right? Which may be another conversation for another day. But it's always interesting when you look at funeral service families and their families or not, right? And so I think that when you look at, let's say, the Ledford family, right, they are not your traditional funeral service family, meaning every time you see me, you're going to see them, right? That's not who and what we are. And I think that is key to the success of our family, right? Because people are often like, oh my God, I didn't know you had kids, I didn't know you had a wife, whatever, because that's typically not something that I would, showcase or broadcast as I was building. right? Because you can name the funeral service family, right? And think about, unfortunately, the situations that happen when there's so many involved, with one business and with one entity.
For sure.
That being said, my family has zero interest in the business, right? And I'm careful with what I'm saying so that people don't misinterpret it. And so they have their own lives, right? And so there is no blending, there's no confusion, there's nothing when it kind of comes to Ledford Funeral Home and its operations, because each of them are doing their own thing, that they enjoy doing. And for me, for my life, that was balance, and that was very, very healthy. Now, when situations happen and we need all hands on deck, of course, they will step in and do what they need to do. But in terms of the day-to-day and the operations, that is just not something that where you would find them.
Gotcha. Definitely understandable. And yes, for sure. I have had a chance to meet, I believe, Mrs. Ledford, but definitely very beautiful family that they have built together, and definitely a beautiful brand that you all have built for sure. So I definitely understand on that aspect of kind of finding balance and that separation, because that is very important. Can't making sure that funeral service does not kind of like take over the aspect of what the family becomes.
Yeah. And Courtney, I actually just want to hang there for just a minute. And this might be jumping out of sequence, but in my mind, there's a logical line, because oftentimes you'll hear students and persons of interest talk about how difficult it is to get into funeral service or get a job, but more importantly, get an internship, right? And I think oftentimes they don't realize that, funeral home is 2 words, and the last word is home. And typically, that is where the funeral director, regardless of gender, lives, right? And so they live there with their partners, with their significant others, and or with their families. And so when an employee or a potential employee comes to work at that establishment, that's someone's home, right? And I think that probably everyone out there has a level of not so much discrimination, but who is it that you would allow into your home, right? And so when you're going to a funeral home looking for work or looking for an internship, please keep that in mind, right? Because you're going into someone's personal space. They live there. Their bedrooms are there. Their kitchen is there. Their living room and dining room is there. Their family is there, right? And so most people would not open the door for just any and every one. And so the same holds true in the funeral industry. And I don't think that people sometimes make that or understand that, understand that connection. And so when you're looking at my family, when you're looking at your family, who is it that you would open up the door and say, okay, you can come on in here and work around my children? There's a level of probably discretion that people would use. And so oftentimes I don't think that students and persons of interest make that connection, especially being in the schools, because I hear it all the time. Mr. Ledford, I can't get an internship, right? And so, okay, where did you go? How did you look? Would you hire yourself? Would you allow your own self in your house? Looking like that, thinking like that, talking like that.
Yeah, definitely. For certain. First impressions, images are a very big thing, especially in this industry, where the sacredity of the industry has been lost in a way. At least that's kind of how I feel. Dealing with certain people in the industry and being able to become acquainted with certain viewpoints of how certain people see the industry, I can definitely understand why it's become such a very sensitive thing about who will work where and how easy or difficult it is to be able to become intertwined into the fabric of an already existing funeral home. But kind of taking a step back into your life, what was the turning point where you realized like you were called to work in funeral service? Because I know you always said you always had that pull, but what was like that one thing that said, yeah, this is what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life?
So like I said, I think if I was to put, if I was to pinpoint, I think it's probably like first grade where I had the realization, and my grandparents were ministers, so I was kind of in and out of the church all the time. There was always funerals, and I just had this, fascination and pull towards it. But probably first grade is kind of when I think that I can remember articulating that. But fast forward to senior year in high school, and a very, very close friend of mine literally right after graduation. I think we graduated on June the 17th. And he unfortunately lost his life on June the 21st.
Mhm.
And I remember sitting in the Catholic Church in Linden, New Jersey, having just lost, a dear friend. Um, and it was at that moment, it was just like, this is it. This is what it's going to, this is what it's going to be. And so that is, I would say, maybe the transitional moment, right? But then I got kind of smacked with the reality of, well, wait a minute, once you're kind of in it, and you're learning and you're studying, you may not be making that much money, and you're like, well, I can't keep doing this. There's no money. Or you're in mortuary school, and for some people, mortuary school is the dividing line, because some people make it and some people don't. For me, thank goodness, mortuary school wasn't the issue. It was when I finished and then wanted my own, but didn't have the capital, right? And so that really kind of became the challenge. So I knew it was something that I wanted to do, but the reality of it was I can't do it just yet, or I can't do it right now.
Gotcha, for certain. And I know you touched on it a little bit, but on the topic of mentorship, kind of who are some people that you look up to in terms of like the funeral industry and the funeral world?
I would say unequivocally, that would be my boss, Carolyn Wiggum. Not only is she, or was she, I guess technically, I'm not employed there now, but was she my boss?
Mhm.
But she was a mentor, she was a confidant, and she was a silent leader, right? And so for those of you who know her or know the perception of her, right, you would think very loud and very, very, very vocal. I don't know her that way, right? I don't know her the way that I would say mainstream America knows her. And I think it's because, I wouldn't say I think, I know it's because it's alignment, right?
Mhm.
And my students can tell you that that's what I talk about 24/7. There was alignment that happened when I met her. Um, and either I had a strong need or she had a strong need or a combination thereof. And those energies met, right?
Mhm.
And that's how we were connected. Um, and it's interesting because I remember kind of being hired and then going through mortuary school. And even to this day, people will be like, oh my God, like you work for her. How could you work for her? Like no one works for her. No one survives there. But I don't know that person. Which is very, very interesting. I know her to be a very, very strong leader, a very, very silent leader. Although she's very, very vocal. She's very, very educated and very, very skilled, right? And so she had everything for me, and still does to this day. I mean, literally a phone call and a text away, and we're in conversation all the time. But that is the person who is responsible for who I am, and for what I do in funeral service. Although I came out of there and was trained, our styles were different.
Mhm.
But I know it was the marriage of those that made us both, and still to this day, to this day, it's attributed to our success, right? But yes, that is the one. She is it.
Gotcha, for certain. Yes, I have had several opportunities to meet Mrs. Wiggum, and I do need to actually give her a call to follow up with her on some things. But she is a very awesome woman, and if you have had the chance to meet her, you would definitely understand she's no nonsense, but she's very about her business, and she also is one of the one of the greater minds of this industry. And I think people can take a lot from her, and just being surrounded by her, being surrounded by her energy, as well as she's a wealth of knowledge for sure.
Mhm.
But it's such an amazing thing when you can find that relationship between this industry. I have that. I'm blessed to have that with the Giddens family.
Mhm.
I've known them since I was a kid, but I had to matriculate through a couple of things in order to be able to kind of get get that sort of kinship professionally. And I'm very blessed to have a relationship like that. So on the topic of kind of being close and related to someone in that manner, I definitely understand that it's a very beautiful thing, that has cultivated some very beautiful things out of the industry for certain.
Yeah. And I think too that what people, may not see or also don't understand is that from the beginning, to the end, is what she did and trained me in, so every room that lies within a funeral home,
Mhm.
every death related entity that happens, whether it's cremation, burial at sea, you name it, like she has that or had that responsibility with me all the way to the bank, right? And so
Mhm.
it's important that we go to the bank as funeral directors,
Yes.
and knowing how to go to the bank and navigate at the bank is critically, it is critically important as well. But again, I will say it's all about alignment. You shared just a little bit about perhaps you weren't ready for
Mhm.
that connection. And my students can tell you, I talk about this all the time, and I have no issue sending students away and telling them to come back, when they're ready. As long as they are living, they will be able to serve dead people. But if you enter into this industry and you're not ready, the alignment is not right, I promise you it will not work.
For sure. For sure. And you and I have had conversations on that years prior also for service. Definitely been blessed to get knocked upside the head by Mr. Ledford, Miss Wiggum, the Giddens family, you name it. Courtney had to get himself together. There's really nothing wrong with that. It's just knowing when to kind of take that step back, so that way you can get those steps forward.
Correct.
Plotted.
Yeah, funeral service is nothing to play with. And that is probably the biggest challenge for people to understand. It may seem easy, right? It's kind of church related, or it operates like the church. But no. And navigating through this thing, at least the right way, it takes work and it takes understanding. And you've got to be able to navigate through school with excellence. You've got to be able to pass those tests with excellence. You've got to be able to serve an internship, with excellence, complete a practical. And then once you get your license, you have to maintain it, right? And all of us see the horror stories that are happening in the news each and every day, unfortunately, surrounding funeral service. This is really not a conversation for the non-credentialed, but for the credentialed, right? You have to work to keep and maintain your license, right? Because there are people out there that have no issue with you losing it, right? And so you got to be careful. Where is it that you work? How do they operate and run their businesses? And if it's a situation where the owner isn't credentialed and you're the credentialed person whose license is on the line, you have to protect that, because otherwise you'll lose it just as fast as you got it.
For certain, protect your license at all costs, especially especially if you've had to work very hard to get it. Even if you haven't, just protecting your license has to be paramount, and making sure that you're operating at the highest level of the highest standard of funeral service. And I know you've already touched on it a little bit early on in our conversation, but for those that are like aspiring to take part in the industry, what are some like important things that they should keep in mind? Like from a student perspective, even just maybe I don't want to go to school, I just want to be at the funerals. I want to sweep the floors. I want to vacuum the cars. What are those things that people should kind of keep in mind as they're like moving through the industry?
Okay, I'm going to answer your question, but just so that I don't forget, just remind me, Carolyn Wiggum, because there's one other point that I forgot.
Okay.
It came to my recollection,
Gotcha.
but I don't want to lose it. So in the funeral space, right, in funeral service, there is an opportunity and there are jobs for everyone. So depending upon what it is that you want to do, there's probably a role for you, right? You mentioned cleaning, safety and sanitation, building maintenance. There are those persons that interact with our consumers in terms of door help, or the role of that of a funeral attendant, right? And so I hear it all the time. Oh, I just want to do the hair, or I just want to do the makeup, and so we have so many opportunities for people to bring their skills into this industry. I think that there's a difference, though, in terms of when you cross the street declaring that you want a credential, right? Because there's a designated path that you have to follow. And that's what the law says, right? And so with that, you have to follow the check boxes that your state has in terms of requiring the licensure. And so whatever that is, you want to make sure that you know what that is before you enter into the industry. My team can tell you, and they hate that I do this, but every time that someone comes, to the funeral home looking for work, I'll ask them what it is that they want to do. Oh, I want to be a funeral director. All right. So my first question is going to be, well, tell me what it takes legally to get there. Right. And I just think that for me, if this is something that you declared that you wanted, you need to know the roadmap in order to get there so that someone can help you get there. But if you don't know, it's kind of like shooting in the dark, in my opinion. But again, my staff hates the fact that I asked that question. That question usually sends people running out the building because they can't answer it. But, it just kind of is a separator for, from my perspective. You're the one who said you wanted to do it. So you let me know what is it that I can do to support you kind of getting there. And so I just think that a person needs to declare what it is that they want to do and then finding themselves within that space in order to do it. Recognizing that all funeral homes are different, they're managed differently. And so there may be an opportunity for, you here in funeral home A, there may not be. There may be an opportunity for you here at funeral home B, and or they may not be. You can look at funeral homes and see how they run funerals. Some funeral homes run funerals with large staffs, right? I was not trained that way. I was trained to run a funeral by myself. And so funerals, they need one person in order to run them and run them efficiently. That doesn't mean that funeral homes that have many funeral attendants and many directors running services are wrong or right. It's just a matter of how, kind of how we do things. That actually is tying over into my point about Miss Wiggum, so I remembered myself, so you don't have to remind me. I think it's important that people understand both in the industry and with outside of the industry. When you look at the likes of a Carolyn Wiggum, who's an independent owner, right, versus a corporate entity. And then you look at the caliber of the families and clients that she services, as opposed to that of what the corporate entities service, there is, number one, a drastic difference. However, the fact that she is an independent is to be commended, right? Because she doesn't have that corporate backing that is backing her up in terms of finances and staff and access and abilities. But as an independent owner, she plays in that space, and she does that very, very, very well. And by play, I don't mean anything negative, but she is there. I often tell students who salivate over like, oh my God, I can't wait to get a Promethean. So I always ask them, okay, well, if the family hasn't paid you yet, how are you going to pay that bill when it comes?
Amen.
Right? And so some people are in a position to do that. Most are not. Right. And so you may need to stay away from that casket dream until you're in a position where you can pay for it. So that's all a part of it as well.
Showroom has a nice option. They have a nice substitute. So kind of walk us through undergrad, business owner, educator. Kind of walk us through that education life. What kind of drove your drive to kind of go into teaching more so than just kind of doing?
So what happened was I retired from corporate America, and the goal was for me to, I guess, hang out more at Ledford Funeral Home.
Mm-hmm.
And for me personally, this is Kyle, right? Mm-hmm. So everybody has their, I cannot sit in a funeral home 24 hours a day.
Gotcha.
Right. I just cannot do that. For me, it's boring, and I would go crazy. Now, for some people, that is what they do, and I have no issue with that. So I'm always kind of looking for things to do to kind of stimulate me, to kind of keep me going. And what happened was I just kind of stumbled upon an opportunity where Eastwick College had reached out. They had a need for a law professor for state law, and it was on Wednesdays from 6 to 8 p.m. So just 2 hours a week. And I had never, ever even thought about teaching, although mentoring was kind of my, my space. I'd been doing mentoring for many, many years, both both corporately and within the funeral service space. So I agreed to do that, and that was January 3 years ago, or 3.5 years ago, January. And so after a couple of weeks of being at the school, I was basically approached to run the school. And so that was an area for me that I had never ever experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And so it probably took about a month, I would say, of kind of like negotiations, because I didn't know that that was the right thing for me to do at that time. I didn't even know if I wanted to kind of be in that space. I was like, listen, I'm just here teaching New Jersey law. Let me do what I do for 2 hours and be done. But fast forward that April, I took over the program as program director. And with that, I had a phenomenal team of professionals that kind of joined in with me. I do want to name them: Madonna from New Jersey, Jason Campagna from New Jersey, Professor Shawnte Harville, as well as Elizabeth Carter. And what we kind of did was looked at the program and kind of, I would say, revamped it, and worked really hard to change the culture there at the college. And I know that within the 3 years, with the support of my team, the students and the faculty there, some phenomenal things have happened. And we have thankfully produced a lot of licensees out of this time span, which means that your work your work is not in vain. Education is very, very difficult, and we're noticing an issue across the United States with students being able to pass these exams, right? And the exams are critical for you to apply to get your license. Back this April, I actually separated from the school, and primarily because I'm staged to become president of the New Jersey State Funeral Directors Association, and simply it's just a conflict of interest.
Yes.
I can't be in both places and both spaces at the same time, and so it was a decision of mine to separate from the school. Since that time, I've been serving, consulting with them and teaching some classes to ensure that that the needle is continuing to move forward during this transition.
Yes, for sure. And that's a very beautiful thing, knowing when to kind of walk away, because that's another thing that gets lost in this industry. This industry also is people get a hold on to it and they keep hold on to something versus knowing when to walk away and letting it grow. And I see you have one of your students, and she says, "I'm so glad that you did. I learned under you and your team. I am today a licensed funeral director since April 3 of this year. Your team gave me what I needed. I'm one of your licensees produced." So the fruits of your labor, they speak for themselves.
Yes, I'm excited to hear that. And for us in New Jersey, that is a really, 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 really big deal. And I know across the country, we are struggling specifically as a people with passing these exams. And so one of the choices that I made is to ensure that I am in a space where I can be a part of the decision-making process that goes into educational choices, law choices, and things of that nature. And that's a whole other level of funeral service that many don't even know and or understand, right? And I will name the organizations and the associations because it's important that persons of interest and students know, right? The American Board of Funeral Service Education. Those are the folks that are responsible for accrediting mortuary colleges here in the United States. The International Conference of Funeral Service Examining Boards, right? Those are the folks that make, manage, and grade the national board exams. Your state mortuary boards in each of your respective states. Those are the folks that govern the jurisprudence on what can happen as it relates to mortuary science or funeral service. And by jurisprudence, I mean the laws. And that's how it happens, right? And so to be in that space, with these national associations are a seat at the table. Really, that helps kind of push the needle forward, but it also makes sure that there is inclusion, right? Because we all don't think the same. We all don't learn the same. Every state's operation is different. Every state's laws are different. And so it's important not just to have that funeral director's license, but to be a part of the decision-making process and what happens with regards to education and with regards to laws.
Most definitely. And we definitely appreciate all of the hard work that you're doing, and not just in your immediate area, but it shows across the country as well.
Mhm.
Because your impact is a lot greater than a lot of you have impact that it far exceeds your region. And
Mhm.
we just hope that you understand that it is felt far and wide, and your impact is definitely one of those guiding lights that helps the younger generation to move forward. Which is why we consider people of your caliber trailblazers for our platform. There are people that have gone forth and they paved the way, and they've made certain that people can come behind them and they have a better opportunity and a better shot at making sure that they can they can play a substantial role in this industry. But as a trailblazer, where do you see yourself in the future of the industry? Because you've been the licensee, you've been the apprentice, you've been the educator, you'll be the lawmaker.
Mhm.
Where do you see yourself afterwards?
So I don't know that there is an end, right? And then I don't know that there are any more goals that I'm chasing,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of like, oh, that's the next thing that I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I cross the bridge over the age of 50, I'm now kind of trying to position myself to cruise on out.
Gotcha.
But by that, I mean um, spreading my wings in that I really want to make room for people to fulfill and come into the pipeline, right? And so we need professionals in this industry. I think if you look at Facebook, you might cry harder than I would at some of the things that we see, right?
Mm-hmm.
Specific to funeral service. At the end of that, and all of that stuff that we see, are grieving families,
Amen.
right? Who have lost a loved one and who are relying on this experience to get them through, right? And it may seem minuscule, it may seem small, but I always talk about in school how one wrong decision or direction to a family can impact them forever, potentially positive or potentially negative. So, in terms of where I want to go and where I want to be, I just want to continue to open up pathways for future leaders to come and to sit at the table and to be a part of that decision making process when it comes to education and when it comes to laws, because that's what's going to govern how we behave or not.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate that. Um, and just to kind of before we wrap up our time together, can you take some time just to share words of encouragement just for the younger generation, for those that are again aspiring to take part in this industry, and so that way they can kind of just those last final keep these in mind before you decide to go full fledged and dedicate yourself to this ministry that we all have taken part of.
Sure, and I will address that through the population that you just mentioned,
Mhm.
as well as those who are working through, right? And so working through means a person who is in mortuary school, a person who is in the funeral home, a person who is in an internship role and working through towards a credential.
Mhm.
The road is hard, right? The road is long. It doesn't mean that it is impossible. And by no way do I mean any disrespect with the next few statements that I make, but I think that you will understand, especially those of you who have made it through the credentialing process and have obtained license status. It is critical that we read, we read, we read, and we read. And beyond our reading, that we understand, right? So that we can apply the information to take these tests and pass them, right? So that
Mhm.
we can apply the information and fill out an internship application in our state and get it through to the regulators. It is important that we read and understand so that we can get the laws for ourselves and know what it takes to become a credentialed professional and not have to rely on someone else to tell us, lead us, or direct us, right? Because the information is public, it's non-private, it's out there for everyone. And so I often tell my students at mortuary school, you all don't need us, right? You can read, right? So read through the information, make sure that you know it, that you understand, that you comprehend it, because that's going to be the kicker. New Jersey's Board of Mortuary Science, and actually their proper name is the Board of Mortuary Science of New Jersey. That's the educator in me, right? They're very, very strict in terms of how they govern, right? And so if they tell you to do something in 7 days and you do it in 8, you can forget it. It's over, right? Because you've missed that opportunity and you haven't followed direction. If you're to complete an application on both sides, that means both sides of the paper, right? And that's as simple as that. And so it's always important. I want our students and our persons of interest to recognize you want your best self out there. And so you want your prepared self out there. And in order to do that, just make sure that at the bottom of it all, you know and understand what it is that you need to do, how you need to do it, and what it's going to take to be successful. And then there are those of us who are in the industry already working and already functioning that can be there to guide you, to lead you, and to support you. But if you don't have the fundamentals and the understanding at the base level, it's going to be very, very difficult, right? I see funeral service at the manager level in the funeral homes. They're going to be starting to ask people, before they take you on, did you pass the national boards? Right? Because that's the key to the golden ticket, right? And so if you don't have that, it's going to be difficult for you to start. But I promise you that each and every one of you can do this. You just have to put your mind to it. You have to move distractions away. Young people, now this is a generalization.
Say that one more time.
First of all, it's a generalization, right? So it's not pinpointed to everyone. I'll talk to you, Courtney. Young people, you have to stay focused. And there's so many distractions that are out there that will grab your attention and take you away from the goal. For those of you who hang out on Facebook and you're in mortuary school, I challenge you to cut your Facebook time half and half per day and use the other half of the time to study. You'll perform on your NBEs better. I promise you, right? Take away something that you like and or enjoy and make the sacrifice. Because if the goal for you is to pass the national board, you have to put the work in order to do that and in order to accomplish it. And you can do it. It's just a matter of kind of focusing and getting that done.
Gotcha. I definitely appreciate you. Well, on behalf of my team, Raheem, Tiffany, and myself, we definitely want to say thank you for sharing a little bit of a time with us and out of your very busy schedule, because you have so much going on, but you are trailblazing so many paths just for us to come behind you to kind of maintain that which you have kind of put that seed that you all have put in the ground. And so we definitely thank you. We appreciate you for taking the time out to join us. And we want to also wish you a very happy Father's Day coming up, because I know Father's Day is the end of this week. So happy Father's Day to all of our fathers out there, but most especially our trailblazer of the month for certain.
My family doesn't know this yet, but I have a service on Sunday on Father's Day.
Make it a family affair. You are
talking about sacrifice and doing what it takes.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. But we want to make sure that everyone else, before we close out today, we want to make sure that everybody is connecting with us on our socials. And really quickly, Mr. Ledford, before you go, if somebody wants to connect with you, what's the best way that they can kind of get in contact with you?
The best way would actually be to call the funeral home.
Okay.
So I can give you that number. I don't know if you want to put it up on the screen or how.
Well, if you can give it to me, we'll make sure we put it out there.
Sure. It's 609 393 4567. Again, that's 609 393 4567.
Gotcha. I will have that down, and we'll have that up in another graphic that'll be posted a little bit later. But definitely, if you all want to remain connected to this awesome gentleman, I definitely encourage any and everyone that wants to take a serious role in funeral service.
I think that is critically important, that word that you just said, serious. right? Because I'm going to be serious, I'm going to be professional. And so if you want to connect and communicate, I have no interest with that. You know, in terms of, you know, me being open and available, but make sure that you come correct.
Amen. I'm a witness, y'all. He's serious. But yes, we definitely appreciate you. Thank you once again for joining us, and for sharing all that you have. You've definitely dropped some gems on us that many of us have not thought about yet. And so you definitely got the gears turning for sure.
Mhm.
So thank you once again. Want to make sure that everyone once again is connected to our social media platform, all of our platforms on social media. So we have our Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. I do want to note that we are going to be shifting our social pages soon, so just be on the lookout for that. But for the time being, what you see now is where we will be connecting with. And so I want to make sure that everybody is staying connected so that way you all can catch the latest updates as far as whatever is going on with the industry. We also are searching for our next guest for our August lineup. I do want to note that our July lineup, though we received a lot of interest, has been complete for some time now, because this is a special edition, but we will return to regular operations as we return in August. But definitely want to make sure that we thank everyone for joining us. We want to thank you all for tuning in every week, for supporting our platform. And we want to thank you all for keeping our founder and our visionary in prayer also, as he's going through a couple things and he's not feeling well today, but we hope that he is again home resting, doing what me and Tiffany told him to. And until we can meet again on the next week to take a look into his journey to create our roadmap, we definitely appreciate you all, and we will see you all next week. Thank you all. Happy Father's Day to all of our fathers in the building, and we will see you all next week as we prepare to hear from another dynamic gentleman who is serving in his area. Thank you all so much. Good night.